Joining us now, CNN Chief Data Analyst Harry Enton. Harry, we're talking about tariffs here. You're just hearing that conversation. Has Trump push for tariffs been successful in the minds of the American people?
Attention, friends. Today's episode literally blows up traditional notions of North American trade and threatens the future of an entire industry. Imagine this. Canada has just taken the most decisive and unprecedented step in decades. It has officially broken key auto export agreements with the U.S. Yes, you heard right. After decades of complete integration, mutual trust, and unprecedented cooperation, Ottawa is now saying a clear enough is enough and taking the fate of its manufacturing base into its own hands. What provoked such an explosion? The U.S., led by Donald Trump, has once again taken up its old America First rhetoric and hit Canada with new, ultra-tough tariffs, up to 35% on the Canadian auto industry. And they didn't just hit it, they are literally trying to destroy one of the most integrated and powerful industries on the planet, where engines and electronic components cross borders so often that it seemed that the very nature of the market did not recognize borders. But suddenly, everything collapsed. It became clear that if Canada did not respond, thousands of workers would lose their jobs, and the entire economy of the region would go downhill. But Canada chose strategy over despair and aggression. Not just retaliatory measures, a complete rethinking of the country's role in the global economy. The bet is on independence, security, and long-term stability. This is not a local quarrel. It is a ruthless game of takeaway, where Canada says yes to new partners from Asia, Korea, and Japan, while the U.S. becomes an increasingly isolated player. Imagine, while Trump is trying to push through his tariffs, which were supposed to support American factories, the effects are destroying the very foundation of those factories. Tariff wars are turning into a real economic drama, where one of the main actors, the state of Illinois, is seeing manufacturing move away from neighboring Ontario, and competitors are starting to look for more predictable and profitable investment markets in the north. Canada is no longer that quiet neighbor. Now it is a confident, independent player that dictates the rules of the game. And in this battle, there is no room for illusions. The U.S. will either restructure or risk losing a lot. And what do people in America itself think about this? How hard will the new tariffs hit ordinary American consumers, who are already feeling the rise in prices for cars and goods? It turns out that the consequences are so serious that even American trade unions are talking about a deadly threat to jobs. You will see figures that will make your hair stand on end. How the severing of old ties and disruption of supplies to factories lead to delays, losses, and almost inevitable layoffs. And just recently, an unexpected television battle broke out. A provocative video, launched with the support of one Canadian province, became a real headache for the White House and Donald Trump. The president seemed unable to contain his anger, announcing new tariffs in response to a simple advertisement. But no matter how you look at it, it was this move that gave Canada an unexpected advantage. Attention to the issue at the highest level, amid loud headlines and heated discussions. But what next? Will Canada be able to maintain its industrial potential? Will this tense situation turn the entire economy of the continent upside down? And most importantly, how long can the White House ignore the new economic balance, where Canada is no longer just a neighbor, but a serious competitor and strategic partner dictating its own terms? Get ready for a hot dive into the most secretive, intense trade battle in recent times. Today, you will learn not only what is happening behind the scenes of this confrontation, but also what global changes it promises for the whole world. Stay tuned. It will be an explosion of information, emotions, and open questions, the answers to which could change the future of North America forever. Canada is on the verge of the most profound changes in its industrial history, and this moment cannot be underestimated. After decades of the North American automotive industry functioning as a single living organism, in 2025, the situation changed with unprecedented speed and severity. What triggered this shock? For a long time, Canada and the US maintained close cooperation, where a car could be assembled in Michigan, its engine could come from Ontario, and its electronic components could be manufactured in Quebec. All of these operational chains successfully crossed borders. The economies of these countries were interdependent and trust-fueled regional integration. It seemed like a stable union, invulnerable even to political changes. Everything changed in early 2025, when a resurgent America under Donald Trump began to fiercely pursue an America First policy, imposing aggressive tariffs on auto parts imports from Canada. It was a blow, delivered like a cannon shot, to one of the most closely integrated industries in the world. The sharp and unexpected increase in duties to 25%, followed by the threat to raise them to 35%, jeopardized thousands of Canadian jobs and redrew not only the economic but also the political map of North American industry. The U.S. used not only economic measures but also a national security tool, invoking the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, for the first time in history to circumvent USMCA rules and legalize its tariffs, citing threats of smuggling and drug trafficking across the Canadian border. But this brutal attack did not go unanswered. Although Prime Minister Mark Carney officially maintained a restrained tone, internal decisions in Ottawa were sharp and ruthless. The Canadian government responded by imposing mirror tariffs, including on steel, aluminum, and automobiles, and also drastically revised the conditions for U.S. companies' access to the Canadian market, requiring them to make long-term investments and provide guarantees of local production. In addition, Ontario Premier Doug Ford launched a viral advertising campaign mocking U.S. tariffs and raising public awareness of the dangers of protectionism. Interestingly, this campaign was so successful that it forced Donald Trump to respond personally with a 10% tariff increase, which sparked a wave of criticism and deepened the rift between the two countries. At the same time, Canadian companies such as Stellantis and General Motors began to relocate parts of their production to the United States, for example to Illinois, which had a significant impact on employment in Ontario. Analysts note that such migrations were not so much voluntary business decisions as a reaction to an unpredictable and hostile trading environment. According to some data, disruptions in supply chains and production reorganization in 2025 resulted in the loss of over 15,000 jobs, which is equivalent, for example, to the complete closure of the two largest car factories in the region. But perhaps the most significant change is Canada's transition to writing its own industrial history. The government focused on creating a national strategy based on independence and security rather than blindly following old agreements that now seemed vulnerable and dependent on Washington's changing policies. Canada began to steadily expand its contacts and economic ties with Asia, including South Korea and Japan, which posed a real challenge to the traditional dominance of the United States in the region. Experts note that this process is not an impulsive reaction, but a carefully planned step to minimize risks and strengthen its own economy. Canada has announced its intention to prioritize investment stability and long-term predictability over mere formal membership in trade agreements. At the same time, it is open to dialogue, but only on equal terms and with mutual benefit. Several semi-official sources indicate that at the level of government negotiations, Ottawa no longer considers U.S. unilateral tariffs to be acceptable, but sees them as an attempt at economic pressure that could undermine everything around it. Even American analysts acknowledge that the protracted trade conflicts and tougher measures are destroying not only trust, but also the real production capabilities of both countries. Production chains have begun to fall apart. Even the smallest delays in component deliveries slow down entire assembly lines and increase the cost of the final product, reducing competitiveness in the global market. From the point of view of the average citizen, the tension is felt in every purchase and every price increase. The auto union warns that ongoing tariff wars could destroy tens of thousands of jobs, and ordinary consumers are already feeling the rise in prices for cars and everyday goods. In a globalized economy, unilateral tariffs designed to protect domestic producers turn out to be a poisoned sword that wounds the very initiators of the conflict. Overall, 2025 was a painful but inevitable wake-up call for Canada. It made it clear that the old model, based on unconditional partnership and trust in the U.S., no longer works. The time has come not only to defend its interests, but also to form a new industrial course, free from blackmail and pressure. Canada has proven that it is capable not only of taking advantage of the global economy, but also of being a strong, independent player that dictates the rules on its own terms. This turning point will be the starting point for the future of North America and the world, where Canada will cease to play the role of a junior partner and begin to write its own history of modernization and sustainable development. Canada's response to unprecedented pressure and tariff blows from the U.S. was not just a reaction, but a real strategic shift that could change the entire landscape of the North American economy. Contrary to many expectations, Ottawa did not go down the path of confrontation with raised voices and mutual insults, but chose a methodical and thoughtful approach aimed at strengthening its industrial base and gaining control over its own future. A key element of this response was the decision to abandon automatic participation in old agreements and collaborations in the auto industry, which had long been taken for granted. This procedure, which Mark Carney's government calls restoring balance, involves the introduction of new conditions for cooperation. Now, American and Canadian companies can only access the Canadian market if they make real investments and long-term commitments to create jobs within the country. Conditions that may have seemed excessive in the past have now become strict and mandatory. The Canadian government is sending a signal to the whole world. From now on, cooperation is only possible on equal terms, and privileges are not automatically granted. This is a key step towards building a fully independent and reliable industrial strategy based on three pillars: protecting existing industries, creating new capacity, and attracting investment in technologies that are critical to the modern world. To strengthen the protection of domestic funds, Ottawa, for example, has decided to use government procurement as a tool to guarantee the market for local steel and aluminum producers, preventing them from being left behind even in the midst of tariff wars. At the same time, a program of megaprojects was launched, including the development of the defense complex, the expansion of clean energy projects, and the modernization of nuclear facilities. In particular, large-scale financing for the construction of small modular reactors in Darlington has become a symbol of the new industrial course. Although these projects have only recently begun to receive funding, there are already rumors of a possible impact on labor and investment markets, which could lead to the creation of tens of thousands of new jobs in high-tech and strategic sectors over the next 5 years. Some insiders also report informal negotiations in which Canada has offered Japanese and Korean companies favorable tax breaks during the initial phase of production, further stimulating the inflow of capital from Asia. The perception of Canada as a passive player is automatically dispelled. It is literally rewriting its economic image, becoming a highly desirable and reliable partner for global investors. Thanks to its abundance of natural resources, including rare earth metals, nickel, and lithium, which are necessary for the production of batteries and modern technologies. This diversification allows Canada to reduce the risk of relying solely on unpredictable U.S. policy and opens up new opportunities for cooperation on the international stage. Eastern markets such as the Asia-Pacific region and the European Union are already responding to these signals by investing in Canadian mining and technology projects. At the same time, Canada's strategy contrasts with the situation in the U.S., where domestic industry is facing increasing difficulties. Declining production, rising operating costs, and a lack of clear rules of the game are creating tensions on both sides of the border. While American factories are facing supply delays and rising component costs, the Canadian economy is showing signs of steady growth, driven by both government investment and private capital inflows. Despite all of Washington's attempts to protect its market, its actions are only pushing Canada to further develop its independence and strengthen alliances with other countries.